Daf Tzadi Aleph Amid Aleph Amar Mar. It's a few lines into the page. Today's daf is purely drushes from beginning to end. There's no shakvataria. It's just drushes from beginning to end. And we're continuing in which karbanos require nesachim, which nesachim are wine libations, and also they would take minchas nesachim, which is flour and oil, and not the kmitza and partially eaten, just entirely burnt. That's called the nesachim. Which karbanos need, which karbanos do not need. So we started yesterday, and the Gemara will continue in the drushes today. So Amar Mar, we said yesterday, Toida Minai, and how do I know that a Toida requires nesachim? Talmud Loimar Oy Zevach, the extra Oy. The extra Oy, Zevach is a shlamim, and Oy is to include a Toida. So says the Gemara, Atu Toida lav Zevachu. Isn't a Toida Zevach? Why do I have to include the Toida from Oy? Why is there, meaning it sounds like a Toida is some sort of chiddush about a Toida that I wouldn't have, Toida is a carbon. Why would I think it's not included in the word Zevach? It's itzrich. I'll tell you the chiddush of a Toida. You need the special word to include the Toida. You might think that because the Toida has already so much bread, the bread is like, yaitza, that's the nesachim. Meaning, you might think that because it has the 40 loaves that come with it, Hashem doesn't require anything else. So Kamash Malon, the extra oil is to include the wine libations. Says the Gemara, Umaishnam ayil nazir. Wait a minute, the nazir brings an ayil, deikabade lechem, that has 20 loaves with it, ubay nesachim, and that requires nesachim. So why would I think that a taida, because it has bread with it, it doesn't require nesachim? An ayil nazir has bread and requires nesachim. So what's the havamina? So the Gemara says, over there the ayil nazir only has 20 loaves of bread. This has 40. So much bread, you might think Hashem says, you know what, okay, you don't have to associate it with libations as well. And therefore the extra oy. Okay, so now the Gemara has a kasha. We said yesterday, the pasuk says, neder oy nedava, which we said is to tell you that the karbanis that require nesachim are the type of karbanis that are optional, to exclude, which excludes Pesach, Meiser, Chatas, which are obligatory. Okay. So here's the shaila. Once you have the words neder oy nedava, which is optional karbanos, why do I need the word oila? The pasuk starts off with oila. Then it says neder nedava. An oila is a type of neder nedava. Why do I need both? Once you tell me neder nedava, it's any carbon that is optional, i.e., an oila is one of them. So why do I need both? So says the Gemara, so the Gemara says, Eloi kasav oila, if the pasuk had not written the word oila, then I would have made the following klalu pratu klal, which would have been a problem. I would have made the following klalu pratu klal, if not for the word oila. I would say, V'asisem isha laHashem is klal. Lefali neder oy nedava is a prat. La'asais reich nichoyach is chazav a klal. And I would make the following conclusion. I would say, klalu pratu klal, yata danachena prat, ma prat mefurish davar she'ena balachet, af kol she'en balachet. If not for the word oila, I would say that the prat is not just optional karbanos, it's karbanos that don't come because of sin. That's what I would have focused on. And therefore, I would have af kol she'en beichet, oitzi chatas ve'asham, and I would have excluded chatas and asham, she'en bon alchet, avi bechar meiser pesach she'en bon alchet. But I would have included a bechar meiser and pesach, which, while obligatory, are not sin-based. I would have focused on lefali neder or nedava. Neder and nedava, there's multiple components. They're optional. They're also not because of sin. I would have focused on that. The word oila tells me, no, don't focus on the sin part, focus on the optional part. Therefore, once I have the word oila, it tells me I don't make this, I'm not going to include a bechar and a meiser, a pesach, that they have in nesachim, tamlemer oila, that no, it has to be mamish optional, as opposed to those karbanis that are obligatory. Okay, so here's the point though. Now that we have the word oila, so what does this klal pratu klal do? We still have a klal pratu klal framework. If not for the word oila, I would have included karbanos that I should not have. Now that the word oila tells me not to do that, so what is the klal pratu klal doing? Says the Gemara, Hashir the Chesiv oila klal pratu klal my marbislei. So the Gemara says it includes, the klalu pratu klal is including all optional karbanos, even the type of karbanos that are not your classic optional ones. The classic optional carbon is you go over and you say, I'm going to bring a carbon today. It was optional, I didn't have to do it. The klalu pratu klal is now including other optional ones that are a little more strange. The Gemara explains, if you make an optional carbon, and then it's pregnant, So you bring the baby as well. The baby is also considered an optional carbon. It's just not your classic optional carbon because you sort of got into it in a weird way. Or a timuraso, a timura. A timura is really an extension of an optional carbon. Again, it's not your classic. Or oila haba min amesaros. Again, you have a surplus oila. You lost the oila, you found the original, then you replaced it, found the original. Again, it's an optional one, but not your classic. Asham shenitik laria. If you have an asham that is no longer usable, viable, so what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to let it graze. You give it to a farmer, let it graze, it gets a blemish, and then you replace it. What if while the farmer takes it, before it gets a blemish, he just brings it as a carbon? He's not supposed to, but let's say he did. It becomes an optional carbon. So the Gemara says, and again, v'chol hazvachim shenizbuchu shaloi l'shman, and every carbon that was shechted shaloi l'shman, it's no longer obligatory because you're not yotzeh. It becomes an optional one, and all of these karbanos require nesachim. Okay, now we said yesterday that the word oy is coming to include a toida. So now the Gemara says, now that you're darshaning the word oy, there's like 4 oy's in these psukim. So now we got to go through each one. Says the Gemara, Hasha da amrit oy l'drasha. Now that you're telling me the word oy is for a drasha. So now let's go through many oy's in the pasuk. Lefale neder oy b'nedav l'amali. What does the oy do of this pasuk? Again, it's all the same pasuk for nesachim. So says the Gemara, itzrich. Sol kedai chamina. Okay. Basically, let me just say outside what the Gemara is going to be doing for the next 30 lines. You have to bring nesachim for every neder or for every nedava. Now, a neder and a nedava are the same concept. It's just hare alai or hare zu. That's the basic. It's just different formations. It creates a different. One is more that the carbon is an option. The animal is a carbon, but if the animal were to die, I'm out. Or hare alai means that I'm obligated to bring a carbon, and if something goes wrong, I have to replace it. But it's all the same concept. The word neder oy nedava and the multiple formations of oys that we're about to get to is to basically tell me the following thing. You have to bring nesachim for every neder and nedava that you bring, even if you bring 5 of them. You're not covered by one. And even if you bring 2 nedarim, or 2 nedavas, 2 each. What if I bring a shlomim and an oila? What if I bring 2 shlomim? What if I bring 2 oilas? The basic flow of this is we're darshaning ois, and the conclusion is going to be every carbon you bring needs a nesachim. So we just got to get there. So the Gemara says, itzterch. The reason why I need the word oy is as follows. Sol kedai techamina, you might think about, I think, halfway through the Amid. Is that where we are? About halfway through the Amid. Sol kedai techamina, you might think, adamaisi neder unedava loy lebay nesachim. You might think that you only get nesachim if it's and, meaning, only if you bring a neder and a nedava do you have to have a nesachim. Kamash malan, the oy tells me, no, it's or, that if you bring a neder, you're going to need nesachim, or if you bring nedava, you need nesachim. Kamash malan, da'isi neder l'chudei l'may nesachim, v'ya'isi nedava l'chudei l'may nesachim. Meaning, if not for the word or, I would translate the vav as and. Now, if you remember yesterday, yesterday we said that's a machlekes of Yoshi and Rav Yonasan. Throughout the Torah, whenever there's a vav, is it and or? So you're saying, if not for the word or, I would say it's and I would only bring nesachim if I bring 2 karbanos. So says the Gemara, Hanich Rav Yoshia. That's Rav Yoshia shita, that every vav is and until proven otherwise. El Rav Yonasan lamali, but according to Rav Yonasan, no, it's always or until you're told you have to bring both. So according to him, I would translate the vav as or anyway. So what do I need the o for? The extra aleph? I don't need it. So says the Gemara, okay. According to Rav Yonasan, it's the following. If not for the word o, I would read the following conclusion. You bring a neder, you bring nesachim. Good. I see nedava l'chudei nesachim. You bring a nedava, you bring nesachim. Good. I see neder unedava, but if I bring a neder and a nedava together, tisbi nesachim chad. Maybe you only need 1 libation that will cover both. Meaning, you do have to bring, but maybe one covers both karbanos. Kamash malan, no. The word o tells me each carbon, a neder requires its own nesachim, a nedava requires its own nesachim. Good. Keep going. That's for the word o by lefale neder o nedava. Says the Gemara, let's keep going. Now that we're darshaning O's, let's keep going. Oy b'mayadechem lamali. What do we do with oy b'mayadechem? So kadechem inahani milidekamaisi oy b'neder. Ushlamim b'nedava inami ibcha. Aval hechat dekadanaisi oyla v'shlamim b'neder inami oyla v'shlam b'nedava shem neder echa v'shem nedava achasi v'tizkil b'nesachim dechad. Meaning like this. We just established that if I bring a neder, I need a nesachim. I bring a nedava, I need a nesachim. If I bring them both, I need 2 nesachims. It says the Gemara, I would think that that's only true if you bring a neder and an oil and a shlamim, different karbanos, and one's a neder and one's a nesachim. But if, let's say, I bring an ola and a shlamim, different karbanos, but they're both nedarim. So I say I'm going to bring a neder of an ola and a shlamim, so they're both nedarim. Or I'm saying I'm going to bring a nedava of an ola and a shlamim. They're both nedava, different karbanos, but same formation of the vow. So you might think that one would cover both. Kamash Malan. So the first oy tells me that you need a carbon for both. The second tells me that even if it's different karbanos, but both nidarim or both nidavas, you also need karbanos for nesachim for both. Keep going. V'chisasa ben bakar oyla oy zevach lamali. What are we dashing with this oy? So the Gemara says, "Itzrich sal kedetach min hani melichad kamaisi oyla ushlam beneder. Inami oyla b'shlam benedava. Aval hechad kamaisi shtei oylas chadam beneder b'chadam benedava. Inami shtei shlam ech beneder v'ech benedava. Emi shem shlam achasi. Shem oyla achasi. V'tiz a bigger chiddush. What if I bring an oila, one neder and one nedava? So they're both the same animal, different vow formations, but the same animal. So you might think one nesachim covers both. Kamash malan. So again, we're whittling our way down to the ultimate conclusion is every carbon requires its own nesachim. But we had the first different carbonos, but same formation. Now same formation, different. Yeah, now it's different formation, same karbanos. Meaning both olas, but one's a neder and nedava. Still I need both. And the last one, lefale neder oy shlamim lamali. What is that coming to teach me? That's coming to teach me the following. Maybe you only have to bring different nesachim. When one's a neder, one's a nedava, albeit it's the same animal, Inami shishlam chad bened v'chad benedava. Aval heichad kamaisi shtei oilos bened v'shtei oilos benedava. Inami shtei shlam bened v'shlam benedava. Shem oila echad hu shem neder echad hu. V'tiskim benasachim dechad. What if I bring two oilos and they're both nedarim? Same animal, same vow. So you might think one nesachim covers both. Kamash malan. So what we've done is we've used all these ois to tell me that in every single formation, same animal, different karbanos. Different neder nedava. Both nedarim, different animals. Both nedarim in the same animal. It still requires its own nesachim for each animal brought. Okay, just to conclude this topic, the Gemara says, "Rav Yoshia, hai min abakar min atzayin lamali." What does Rav Yoshia do with min abakar min atzayin? Because Rav Yoshia used the first one to tell me to exclude a bird. So what does he do with this drasha? The Gemara says, "Sal kadai tachamine hane mila b'trei minim av b'chad mina taskil b'nesachim dechad kamash malan." Again, this is what we had before, which is that according to Rav Yeshua, you might think you only need separate nesachim when there are two different types of animals, but if it's the same animal, one nesachim suffices. Kamash malan, no, a nesachim for each. And kacha tasel echad lamali, which is the last drasha of this pasuk. Sal kadai tachamine. Hani mili bezachar zeh ava bevas achas tiski le b'nesachim dechad kamash malon. After darshaning so many iterations that you need a nesachim for each carbon, says the Gemara one more chiddush. Maybe you only need a separate nesachim for each carbon when you made the neder on separate days. Meaning, I say today harei alai oila, and the next day I say harei oila. That's when you need two nesachim. But what if I say harei alai shnei oilas? It's at the same time, same animal, same neder. You still need two nesachim. Okay. Good. Now, the Mishnah then said, I told you, today is purely drushes from beginning to end. The Mishnah then said, normally a chatas and an asham, no nesachim, but there's one exception, and that is the mitzayra. Ela shechatasei shel mitzayra v'ashamai ta nesachim. The mitzayra brings three karbanos, and one is a chatas and one is an asham, of those three, and the chatas and the asham of the mitzayra requires nesachim, even though normally a chatas and an asham do not. These are the exceptions. Minat nimili, how do I know that this is true? The Tanu Rabbanan. Now, it says regarding the mitzayra, ushloisha esroinim soiles mincha. Okay, let me explain outside. The nesachim are two parts of nesachim. There's wine libations, okay, and then there's flour, which is burnt, the minchas nesachim, which is burnt on the mizbeach. Now, a mitzayra brings three karbanos. The pasuk says, regarding three karbanos, ushlosha esronim soles mincha. The mitzayra brings three esronim of flour, and they're burnt on the mizbeach. Now, let me ask you a question. You don't have to be that clever. Three karbanos, three esronim, an isaron for each karban, which means the chatas and the asham require their own minchas nesachim. Now, we have not proven wine libations, but we've proven at least the flour libations covered. Because it says three isaron, three karbanos. All right. Says the Gemara, b'mincha haba emazeh v'chal medaber. Now, says the Gemara, maybe not. Maybe it's not actually one for each. Maybe The pasuk is actually saying, really, the chatas and the asham don't require it all. Maybe the pasuk is just saying that every mitzora has to bring his own mincha, a separate carbon. That's 3 isaron. Maybe not that it's the mincha is associated with the carbon and it's a nisachim of the carbon. Maybe, says the Gemara, the mincha ata omer mincha ba mezevach or einel mincha ba b'fnei atzmo. Maybe the pasuk is not saying really the chatas and the asham don't have any libations associated with it. So why is he bringing 3 isaron? Maybe he has to just bring a separate mincha that's 3 isaron big. I don't know. And by the way, separate minchas have separate rules. The minchas nesachim are entirely burnt on the mizbeach. Maybe this is a standard mincha where you do the kmitza. Maybe it's just a separate thing. Well, the pasuk says es ha'oila ve'es ha'mincha, which means the mincha is with the oila, which means if one of the isaron is with the mincha, with the carbon, that means the other 2 are also with the carbonas as well. Now, okay, so we've proven 3 isaron, 3 carbonos, an isaron for each, which means each carbon, including the chatas, there's a chatas, asham, and ola. Each one has its own flour libation. Now we still have to prove that there's a wine libation associated with it as well. Says the Gemara, but I still don't know whether it brings a wine libation with it. Tamalomar. So how do I know that it brings a wine libation? Tamalomar. Now it says regarding, now this is important, this pasuk is not regarding a metzora. This pasuk is regarding libations. It's regarding nesachim. And it says as follows, V'yayin l'nesach revi'as ahin, right, you bring wine, a revi'as of ahin, Tasa al ha'oila, oila zevach, lakeves echad. So you bring it for the oila, or for the carbon, lakeves echad, for the keves. Now, by the way, I could already tell you, just if you want to just like spoil it, who's this? This is Rabbi's Mahalach. Rav is going to tell you, it never says over here that we're talking about a mitzvah, but Rav is going to say, it says, oila, zevach, keves, 3. Who else brings 3 carbonos? Nobody. The mitzvah always brings 3. So I can figure it out. But we'll get to that. Says the Gemara, oila zu oilas mitzvah, zevach zu chatas mitzvah, oy zevach zu asher mitzvah. So this pasuk, which references 3 carbonos, although it never says it outright, we know that it's talking about the mitzvah. And you see, the mitzvah has to bring wine libations because this pasuk is about wine libations, and we're darshaning it has to do with the mitzvah. Very good. Now, quick question before we address this pasuk more directly. It says the Gemara, "V'tepikle travayim mizebach." Now, again, the word oila is the oila, the word zebach is the chatas, and the word oy is the asham. Why doesn't the zebach just cover both? Why can't the zebach be the chatas and the asham? Why do I need? No, the zebach is the chatas, and the word o is the asham. Why can't the zebach just? Zebach means a carbon. Why can't it be zebach zu chatas v'asham? Go to the next page. So it says the Gemara, and by the way, how do I know that you do that? Because regarding a nazir, we said chatas v'asham and ayin tamalar mezevach. Regarding the nazir, it's not for now, but regarding the nazir, the word zevach means both karbanos. So why can't the word zevach over here be both karbanos? Why do I need the word oy to include the asham? Why can't both be covered by the word zevach? So it says the Gemara, only by a nazir does the word zevach include 2 karbanos, because by the nazir, both the chatas and the asham are doing the same thing. They're doing the same purpose, which is to be matir him. To be matir the nazir back into regular life, he has to bring a chatas and an asham. Because the chatas and asham have the same functionality, they're both being darshan from the same word. However, but when it comes to the mitzora, they're not doing the same things. The chatas is to be mechaper for the mitzora, and the asham is to be machshir him, to allow him to enter the camp again. So because each carbon is doing a different functionality, they can't be darshan from the same word. You need a separate word for each carbon. But inan trei kroi. Okay, good. Now here's the question. Good? Fine. The question is like this. The pasuk says by nesachim that you have to bring nesachim for oila, zevach, oy zevach. These 3. So we said oila, it's all about the mitzvah, that's our conclusion. Oila is the oilas mitzvah, zevach is the chatas mitzvah, oy is the asham mitzvah. Great. The problem is, the pasuk never says mitzvah. This is our theory. So the Gemara says, well, maybe it's a different carbon. And that's the Gemara's question. The Gemara says, Zevach zuchatas mitzvah, ve'ema zuchatas v'asham de nazir. How do you know that it's talking about a mitzvah at all? Maybe it's a nazir. Maybe this pasuk is actually talking about a nazir. And a nazir, the oil of a nazir, the chatas of the nazir, the asham nazir, maybe those have to bring libations. So it says the Gemara, lo yisal gadaytach can't be. The Tanya, I'll tell you why. Ditanya mincha samin iskehem ba'ilosai ub'shlom avakasa medaber. Ata ilosai oimer b'ilosai v'shlom av'ein ala afilu chatas. Let me say that's how. Then I'll restart it. The reason why this can't be nazir is because if it was nazir, that would mean that the nazir's chatas, right? We said that maybe the word zevach is not talking about mitzayra; it's talking about a nazir. Here's the problem: if that were to be true, that would mean that a nazir's chatas gets libations. That's not true. We know that that's not true. The Gemara says, that's not true. I know a Nazir is out because I know a Nazir's Chatas does not have Nisachim from a different drasha. This is the following drasha that excludes a Chatas. So I know a Nazir is out anyway. It says, the Nazir only brings Nisachim for his oila and his shlamim. How do I know that he doesn't bring an Nisachim for his Chatas? Ayel b'chlal haya, v'lama yatz l'hakashalav ma'ayel miyuchad ba b'neder b'nedava avkol ba b'neder b'nedava. The pasuk over there specifically says only optional karbanos of the nazir, not the chatas, which is obligatory. Great. The point is, meaning not a chatas because they're all obligatory for a nazir, but a chatas is the category of obligatory karbanos. The point is, a chatas of a nazir does not have libation, so a nazir is out. So the nazir category is gone. Therefore, I have no other choice but to be a mitzayra. Says the Gemara, let's keep going. Oila zu oilas mitzayra. We said the word oila is a reference to the mitzayra. Again, nowhere in the pasuk does it say it, we just thought that. Eima zu oila yeledes. Maybe the pasuk is not talking about a mitzayra at all. It just says an oila gets libations. So maybe it's talking about when a woman gives birth, she brings an oila, maybe she has to bring libations. And by the way, she does have to bring libations. So it's true anyway. So says the Gemara, I'll tell you why it can't be. I already know that a woman who's a yeledis brings a nesachim with her oila from a different source. I don't need it from this pasuk. It says, Tanya, Reb Nasan Aimer, La keves zu oilas yeledis. Ha'echad ze achad asar shel meiser shekarav shlomim shloim etzinu b'chol Torah sheyetafel chamim min eker. Basically, this drasha says there's two karbanos that require nesachim. One is the oilas yeledes. Now, stop right there. That's how I know an oilas yeledes is covered, which means the word oila is no longer necessary for that, and therefore it's back to the mitzara. Now, just to finish the drasha, also a thing that requires nesachim is echad asar shel meiser, 11th of the meiser. What does that mean? So it means like this: meiser behema, they would let the lambs go through, and you would mark the back, and you would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, and then you would mark the 10th, and that would be meiser. Now says the Gemara, and meiser does not have libations. So remember, meiser is one of the 5 that does not. Now says the Gemara, what about the following situation happens? What if accidentally I mark the 11th, and then I realize, oops, my bad, and then I mark the 10th? The halacha is both are karbanos. Again, it's not for now, both are karbanos, but the halacha is, interestingly enough, the 11th actually has libations, because it's not really the meiser. But it's a chiddush because the meiser doesn't, but the 11th, which was a mistake meiser, does. Okay, fine. That's he says. Loi matzinu b'chol Torah she'etafel cham min eker. We don't normally find that the tafel, which is like the one that's pretending to be requires it, but the ikr does not. Okay, fine. Kitzer. Now we had a question. We said the word oila, zevach, oy zevach, 3 karbanos. So we said that's probably talking about mitzara. Oilas mitzara, chatas mitzara, hasham mitzara, and they all require libations. Then the Gemara said, well, maybe it's a yeledis, maybe it's a nazir. So Rava said the answer I told you before. Rava Amar, Rava says, which one brings 3 karbanos? A mitzara. So there you go. That's how I know it's a mitzara. It's rational. I don't need drushes. Who brings 3 karbanos? A mitzara. An oila, chatas, and hasham. So mistama, this pasuk, which has 3 ribuyim, is probably talking about a mitzara. Good. Let's keep going. La'ayil lamali. What do we learn from the word la'ayil? Which means a ram. So says the Gemara, Amr Sheshes Larabos Eloi Shel Aaron. This is referring to the ayil of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol brings a personal ayil on Yom Kippur. That ayil requires libations. Says the Gemara, ayil shel Aaron min moyedechem nafka. I thought we had the word moyedechem, which means all karbanos that brought a Yom Tif require libations. So why do I need a special pasuk to include the Kohen Gadol's ayil? So says the Gemara, Sal gadaytechem min hani milit tzibor avad yachid lo. Because the ayil of Aaron is not a communal carbon on Yom Tif, it's a personal carbon. Most carbonos on Yom Tif are communal. So Moyadechem covers all communal carbonos on Yom Tif that requires nesachim. This is a personal carbon on Yom Tif, so maybe it's not included. Kamashmalan, it still needs nesachim. Says the Gemara. Why do I need a special pasuk to include the Isle of Aaron because it's a yachid? Well, the Yoledes is a yachid and it requires nesachim, so obviously the yachid, there's no difference between the yachid and a tzibor. So says the Gemara, she'ein kavu leizman, avodavar shekavu leizman, eimaloi. Yeah, but because this is set on a special time, the Yoledes is a yachid, but it's any time she wants. This is a yachid on Yom Tiv, so maybe it's different. Kamashman, it's not different. Okay. Now, oil ayol amali. Okay, one quick point. Okay, I'm sure we all know this, but in case people don't. Okay, during the first 12 months of its life, a male sheep is known as a keves. After 13 months, it's a ram. We all know. We knew that. No. We knew that a lamb turns into a ram. I never know these things. So anyway, because the first 12 months, it's a keves. Correct. So the first 12 months, it's a keves. 13 months on, it's an ayil. Now an ayil has its own nesachim, and a keves has its own nesachim. What about the 13th month, meaning the 12th month, I'm sorry. For the first 12 months, it's a keves. After 13 months, it's an ayil. So during that 13th month, it's called a palgus. So good to just know that. Okay, and by the way, one thing to remember: the keves has its own nesachim, and the ayil have its own nesachim. It's the only animal, as we'll see the end of today's daf in a few moments. It's the only animal that there's a difference in nesachim based on its age. A little fun fact. Says the Gemara, "Oy la'ayil ameli." What do we do with the word oy? It's larabas, it's a palgus. It's telling me that a palgus also gets libations. So if I bring the first 12 months, I bring the nesachim of a keves. 13 months and on, I bring the nesachim of an ayil. And in the 13th month, if I bring a carbon, I also bring nesachim as well. Meaning, don't think that it's excluded, kamash one. Now, let me say outside, and we'll say outside. Now, here's the thing. It's a machlokes between Rav Yochanan and Rav Bar Pada as to what is the status of a palgus. According to Rav Yochanan, a palgus is a new bria. There's a keves, which is the first 12 months. That's one bria. 13 months and on, it's an ayil. It's a new category. And then a palgus is a third category. Then it makes sense. Because it's a new category, I need a special pasuk to tell me that category also gets nesachim. But according to Bar Pada holds that a palgus is just a suffix. Meaning, it's a suffix keves, suffix ayil. It's not a new category, it's a suffix. According to this, the Torah doesn't address sveikas. The Torah never gets into sveikas. So why would the pasuk have to be marbe that there's nesachim by a palgus when a palgus is something we just don't know what it is? The Torah will never talk about ben hashmashas. The Torah doesn't do that. The Torah is clarity. We have a lack of clarity. So therefore,
can I bring it as either or?
What do you mean?
Can I bring it as either
according to Bar Pada, when you bring a palgus, you have to stipulate, I don't know what it is. It's either a keves or an ayil, but it's not a third category. The Torah would never address a palgus, which is something we just don't know what it is. That's the point of the Gemara's question, which is why would the pasuk have to be marbe that there's nesachim for a palgus according to Bar Pada when a palgus is something? It's not a new category. So says the Gemara, Hanichler Rav Yochanan. This riboy of a palgus that it requires in the nesachim makes sense according to Rav Yochanan. Damar Briyahu, because Rav Yochanan looks at a palgus as a separate category of an animal. Ditnan, as the Mishnah says, Hekrivu. If you bring a palgus as a carbon, maybe alav niske ayil. You bring the nesachim of an ayil. Ve'ena oilam is zivchay, but you're not going to be yaitze. Why? Because according to Rav Yochanan, it's a new category. So you're not going to be yotze your obligation, because if you were supposed to bring a keves, it's not a keves. And if you were supposed to bring an ayil, it's not an ayil. So therefore, oil ayil or rabbis palgus. It makes sense, because it's a new category, the pasuk has to include it. El bar peda, damer maisi umasni. The Svegu, Bar Pada says, you bring the palgus, what you do is you stipulate. You say, Hashem, I don't know what this is. I know it's either a keves or an ayil. Whichever it is, it should work. Therefore, he holds you actually yotze the obligation. So according to Bar Pada, it's the Krol Rubuyi Sveika. So according to Bar Pada, would the Torah really address a suffix? It doesn't. So the Gemara says, Vadil Bar Pada Kasha. You're right. Bar Pada, I can't explain this. Okay. Now, basically, let me just explain from here into the Mishnah. We'll end this fairly quickly. There's a couple drushes, and basically each drusha is telling me that although a lamb turns into a ram, right, keves to an ayil, and they have different nesachim, no other animal has different nesachim based on age. Meaning, a calf is the same as a cow and etc. So the Gemara says, we're going to go through each word. Now, what do you use l'shara echad? So because we find there's different nesachim for a lamb and a ram, which is the same animal just based on age. So you might think that there's a difference between a bull and a calf, which is the same animal but also separated by age. No, shara echad, all oxen, all bulls are the same. Good. Oila ayil matam lemer. What is the word oila ayil for the ram? Lefisha metzinu shechilak hakasam b'nichlei shana b'nichlei ben shnayim yachon nechalik b'nichlei ben shnayim b'nichlei ben shalosh tam lemer oila ayil echad. What it means like this: there's a difference between a lamb and a ram. So maybe, which a lamb is first year, ram is 2 years. So maybe there should be a difference between a ram and an old ram, meaning like a ram that's 2 years old, which is an ayil, and maybe a ram that's 3 years old should also have a difference. Meaning once the Torah is making distinctions within this animal, and it's the only animal it does it, so maybe for each year, it changes nesachim. Kamash malon, oy. Well, that's the conclusion, but the Gemara is saying, I might think that for each year that the ram, that this animal gets older, maybe it should have a different nesachim. Kamash malon, no. Once you hit the age of 2, it's the same 2 to 50. Says the Gemara, Oil sev kvasim matam loimer. What does oil sev kvasim teach me? Lefishim etzin shechilak hakas b'nichse kavas and nichse ayil yachol nachalik b'nichse kivtza v'nifse rechela. Okay, there's only a difference between a male lamb to a male ram, but a female lamb to a female ewe, which I did not know that a ewe is the equivalent of a ram. It's basically an old sheep. So by a females, there's no distinction. So you might think that because by males there's a distinction between a young keves to an older keves, there should also be a distinction by the females. Kamash malan, no, okay. One more. Oy beizim matam alomer. What does oy beizim teach me? Lefisha metzin shechilak hakas b'nichse keves and nichse ayil yachol nachal b'nichse gdi l'nichse soyer. Tam alomer oy beizim. Goats, which are a different animal. Apparently. No, they're a different animal. So you might think that there's a difference also between a young goat and an old goat. Kamash malan, no. Again, it's the same rule. Only a young lamb to a young ram, which is male. Now, just to finish up, Rav Papa Badaklan Rava. Rav Papa said, Rava once asked us a question in class. There was like a test. He said, Nisle rechela bekama. How much nesachim for an old female lamb? And he wanted to know if they would make the mistake of thinking that because there's a difference in the nesachim of male in age, there's a difference in the nesachim of female. That was the question. So they said, Pashin Lamas Yisan. The answer is Mefurish in the Mishnah, and I'll just say it outside, then we'll see it inside. The Mishnah basically says that the system in the Beis HaMikdash was, which is a much smarter system, obviously, it's the Beis HaMikdash, everything's smart there. The system was, you didn't just show up with libations. That's too complicated. Imagine if we tried to figure this out. If you're a Mitzvah, I wouldn't even know what to do. What you do is basically, you go to the Beis HaMikdash, you tell them your ailment, and they say, well, okay, your nesachim is going to be $6. You give the $6, they give you a card that says lamb or ram or whatever, and then you'll hand it to the person in charge, and it's a token, and he'll give you the nesachim that you need at the proper measurements, all that stuff. So it says the Gemara regarding this system, gedi, for a goat, mishamish nichsei tzayin. If you give a voucher that says goat, you get the nesachim of the tzayin. Shel gedolim v'shel katanim, adult or young, because again, by a goat, there's no difference between old or young. And shel zecharim v'shel nekevis, whether male or female, chutz mishel elam. The only difference is a male lamb to ram. So you see from this Mishnah, there is no difference between females, other than kevis to ayil, there's no other distinction. All right, we'll stop here.
The only thing is the lamb to the ram.
So